Welcome. My name is Danny, and I am so glad you've joined me today for the last video in our series. What you just saw were images of students, educators, and students' families across the state of Texas. If you're joining us for the first time, please take a moment before you dive in to view the brief introductory video and the first few videos of our series on our homepage. In previous videos, we've talked about the importance of strong webs of relationships inside of schools to protect children from stress and trauma during COVID-19. Today, we'll zoom out and think about the connections that extend beyond schools to the families and homes of our students. In the past, partnering with students' families is not something every educator has focused on. But with the shift to remote instruction and students' homes serving as the physical classroom in some circumstances, family partnerships have become a necessity. And for some of you, may feel like a stretch outside of your comfort zone. A commitment to family engagement can be challenging and requires creativity and perseverance. But the work you put in is well worth it when the result is strong relationships. Today, we want to equip you with ideas and strategies for approaching this challenge while also recognizing that we could never provide an exhaustive list of approaches in one video. We invite you to apply each idea here to your unique context. Even before the widespread relocation of school into students' homes due to COVID-19, research has clearly demonstrated that strong school-family partnerships have the power to increase student engagement and the potential to strengthen a student's protective buffer beyond the school environment. Former school founder and leader Niloy Gangopadhyay describes the foundational influence of strong school-to-home partnerships. The educational triangle, students, school staff, and students' families, is key to driving student achievement. And now, with many educators zooming into students' homes daily, and with caregivers managing education from home, the importance of these partnerships cannot be overstated. Even if before COVID-19, the extent of your contact with families was limited to occasional conferences, you've likely realized that much more collaboration is now needed in order to address both the academic and emotional needs of students during this stressful time. As Harvard researcher Jack Shonkoff explains, the most important thing children need to thrive is to live in an environment of relationships that begin in their family but also extends out to include adults who aren't family members. What children need is for that entire environment of strong relationships to be invested in their healthy development. And with so many caregivers currently taking the role of guardian, provider, and remote education supervisor, while dealing with tremendous amounts of COVID-19 related stress, these connections are more important now than ever. So today, our video will focus on two questions. How can I continue to build meaningful and supportive relationships with my students' families? And what is my role as an educator in supporting student families who are dealing with high levels of toxic stress? We'll start by acknowledging first that every family facing high levels of toxic stress will need increased resources and supportive policies to reduce sources of stress at a community level, and that the magnitude of these needs can be overwhelming for educators, leaving some of us feeling uncertain about what exactly our role is. Today, we want to expound upon the powerful words of Adverse Childhood Experiences, or ACEs, researcher Nadine Burke-Harris. It's unfair to ask teachers to be therapists or doctors. The role of educators is in delivering that daily dose of buffering care that's so important for healing. And as a reminder, whenever you see this symbol, this is your invitation to grab some pen and paper. Throughout this series, if you need extra reflection time, just push pause and take all the time you need. To best engage, we invite you to turn off other distractions and bring your full attention to the learning. One final note, in today's video, we'll be using the term caregiver to refer to any adult who is acting as a caregiver and guardian to a student. This includes but is not limited to moms, dads, grandparents, foster parents, aunts, uncles, and friends who play this important role in a student's life. Now let's go over our objectives. In today's video, we will explain the why behind partnering with students' families and what it means to do that. Define the educator's role as a partner to families and identify strategies for building healthy, responsive relationships with your students' families. Define the educator's role as a resource builder for families and identify strategies for supporting families to build core capacities. And finally, we will identify a strategy for educators to assess stress in families who may need to get connected to more resources. Let's get started. Let's warm up with some reflection. On a scale of 0 to 10, with 10 being extremely connected, how connected did you feel to your students' families before the pandemic started last school year? How about once you transitioned to virtual teaching last year? What is the biggest barrier you face as you try to connect with students' families this school year? Take all the time you need, simply push pause, and restart the video when you are ready. Now that you've spent a little time reflecting on your own experience, here are some of the difficulties we hear about from educators. Lack of time and responsiveness for both teacher and family. Simply making contact can be difficult. Keeping up is always a challenge, but even more so this year. Emotional and physical exhaustion. There are so many needs to be met this year, and both educators and families already feel emotionally drained. Discomfort when an educator is unfamiliar with a family's culture, language, or values. And finally, frustration is sometimes a barrier. Educators tell us that when they can't see the story behind the story, or the layers of complex circumstances a family might be facing, they may create their own negative story about a family, which may lead to judgment or hopelessness, and as a barrier to building a strong partnership with the family. With these barriers in mind, we want to acknowledge the tension here. You may feel, on one hand, that you want to engage families as much as possible. But on the other hand, the barriers we've already listed can make this especially challenging right now. We know we can't fix these problems today, but we'd like to offer a few simple approaches as you consider how you want to come alongside families with both the stress of COVID-19 and your own needs in mind. Let's start with some caregiver voices. We asked a diverse group of caregivers what they most wanted in a teacher-caregiver partnership. Check out the video here.
Okay, thanks so much, you guys, for joining us today. We want to hear what you think is important about a teacher-caregiver partnership in light of distance learning. Could you please tell me the grades of your child or children? And we'll start with Mr. Sidlecki.
Thank you, Jordan. My name is Mr. Sidlecki. I've got two kids, a fourth grader and a sixth grader. Before COVID, it was a lot easier to get to know teachers, whether it was at teacher-parent night, meet the teacher night, dropping kids off, picking them up. It's a lot harder now, but it's probably even more important. So one thing that I wish was that we had a few more opportunities to really get to know who the teachers are who are zooming into our kids' bedrooms here every day, who they are and what drives them, how they teach, those types of things.
Yeah, definitely. Next, can we hear from Miss Easley Card?
Hi, I'm Miss Easley Card, and I have a daughter who's in the third grade. And what I'm really looking for in virtual learning is to feel like my child is seen and known. Establishing relationships is really important part of education, and that's difficult even face-to-face. And so I would like to see that really the focused in virtual learning.
Yeah. Ms. Conlon?
Hi, I'm a mother of a kindergartner, and in these early grades, when they're new to school, it's hard for us to know what they may struggle with or feel successful at. And so we're really looking for teachers who are able to support us in completing assignments or helping us anticipate where our kids might struggle.
Yeah, super important. Mr. Santayana.
Hi. Yes, so I have a daughter who is 6 years old. She's in first grade, and I'm also a parent who is working remotely from home full time. So for myself, trying to really balance my work in addition to helping her with her virtual learning, that it would be helpful for me to be able to have be given opportunities to interact and engage with the teacher in the morning, the afternoon, in addition to her conference time. For me, as I'm going in and out of meetings, that would be very helpful for me.
Yeah. And finally, Miss Lara.
Hi, I'm a mother of 4 teenagers, 2 8th graders, 1 9th grader, and 1 10th grader. And I think the thing that I'm looking for right now in virtual learning most is communication from teachers that is more than the students are missing assignments. I'd like to hear some positive, more just appropriate and positive comments from the teachers. I feel really disconnected. And so it would positive comments and positive interactions with teachers would be much more helpful in addition to, what they need, but just some positive comments and interactions from teachers.
Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you everyone for your time and talking through these teacher-caregiver partnerships.
Essentially, caregivers want the same kind of safety we've discussed in our previous video in this series, Developing a Positive Classroom Culture. With this in mind, remember throughout the video that a trauma-informed lens means helping families, just like students, to feel safe, seen, and soothed as they navigate their child's education. And by building safe connections with families, you are increasing the chances that families have what they need to keep students both online and engaged academically. The bridge that you and your campus support staff build tightens the web of relationships in your school community and ensures that less families will fall through the gap. This is even more essential as many schools have reported low online engagement with particular impacts on vulnerable students. In a summer 2020 study conducted by researchers Matthew A. Kraft and Nicole S. Simon, 7,195 educators reported on student engagement with remote learning in the spring. On average, teachers report that only 60% of students regularly engaged in remote learning activities. Even more concerning, teachers in high-poverty schools reported even less engagement, with only 50% of students regularly engaged in remote learning, whereas their counterparts at low-poverty schools engaged at a much higher rate of 75%. This inequity, which is likely related to factors such as internet access, sibling caregiving responsibilities, and other stressors draining time and energy from families, can be partly addressed through higher engagement with families. While teachers often provide frontline support for families, we realize it takes a village. School campuses should consider developing teams and layers of support to increase family supports, and in turn, family engagement. Collaborating with families to get students engaged with learning translates to increased learning and achievement and better long-term outcomes across developmental domains. Without this engagement, these students are likely to fall further and further behind, creating gaps that will be difficult to address in the future. This is the why of family engagement, and will be important to keep in mind as you take a respectful and compassionate approach to family engagement. So, in order to extend the safety you've built in relationships with students to their families, let's first think through the traditional strategies used to connect with families. They include phone calls, highlighting good reports and addressing concerns, messaging or texting, emailing, newsletters, hosting events at the school, and report card conferences. Now take a moment to consider how these engagement practices can be transformed with 2 factors in mind. First, how has the COVID-19 pandemic impacted family engagement? And second, given the widespread occurrence of ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, in which students experience high stress events such as neglect, abuse, or household dysfunction, how can a trauma-informed lens be applied to family engagement right now? Take all the time you need, simply push pause, and restart the video when you are ready. Many educators have discussed the paradox of zooming into students' home environments, but losing connection with caregivers due to lack of in-person conferences or parent events. In addition, Many educators are aware that their students' families are experiencing a lot of stress right now. Here are some strategies for approaching family engagement through the lens of restoring safety after trauma and stress. First, use inclusive and empathetic messaging, starting with the entire student family community. Letting families know that they are part of a team communicates a sense of community and belonging. Here's an example of a message you could send to start building rapport with families.
Good evening, 8th grade families. This is Mr. Gangapadahe. I hope this short video message finds you well. First, I want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for your patience and flexibility, not through just one school year, but two. In this middle of a pandemic, which has been extremely challenging for all of us, you have shown such patience and flexibility throughout not one school year, but two. Again, we're all feeling the tolls of the pandemic. It's been mentally, physically, emotionally exhausting. We were going to school day to day, every day, fine in the spring, and then we flipped public school on its head. And then we shifted from day to day to remote instruction. We were Zooming into all of your homes. And this fall, we've pivoted a little bit back and forth. Some days we're in school in person, in the building, and then in some days we're still Zooming into your homes. So again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your patience and flexibility. I'm really looking forward to next semester as your child's math teacher because it's their final semester before they're off to high school. And we're gonna do this work together. You say, wait, we? Yes, we. We're gonna do this work together. And this we is gonna be a team. It's actually gonna be a triangle. In that triangle, 1/3 is gonna be me and the rest of the school staff. 1/3 is gonna be you, your child's family, my student's family, and finally, your child and my student. Right? So I'm super excited to get this journey started. I feel so privileged and honored to work with all of you to ensure the success of your children and my students. Accompanying this short video, you'll get an email that will have all my contact information. So you'll be able to reach out via email to set up a time to talk or ask me some questions. You'll also have access to my phone number so that you can give me a call to reach out. We can jump on the phone for a short conversation or potentially a longer conversation so I can get to know you, your hopes and dreams for your children and my students in areas of strength and areas of improvement, particularly around math. And finally, if you want to set up a video conference, we can do that as well. So please reach out before the end of this semester. If I don't get a chance to talk to you before then, please have a warm and safe, wonderful holiday season with your children and my soon-to-be students. Signing off, this is Mr. Gangapadahe. Have a happy holiday season.
Next, establish the preferred format for communication with each family and recognize that many caregivers may have had a negative experience with school themselves and may initially mistrust you or may not share your experiences or assumptions around education. And remember, relationships in general take time. Kind, clear, and consistent communication will help you earn the trust of families over time. In addition, let all families know that you see their child for who they are. As you get to know their students, send messages to all families with short anecdotes or observations about their child's strengths and what you enjoy about their child. Short, simple, strengths-based messages that communicate, I see your child as a whole, unique individual, will lay a foundation for a healthy relationship. As a part of this strategy, also provide regular updates on academic progress. Report card conferences are an integral part of ensuring we maintain what we referred to earlier as the educational triangle: students, school team members, and students' families. Staying connected to your students' families and informing them of their child's progress will help your students' families understand the importance of student achievement and how they can help support their child in school. The more invested our students' families are in their children's schooling, the more involved they will be whenever possible. Second, make yourself or identified staff such as a parent support specialist, social worker, or school counselor available and responsive for more intensive engagement with families who have either asked for help or families who have a child who you notice is struggling academically, emotionally, or socially. Make yourself or identified staff available through one or two communication channels, perhaps email and a free messaging app. and communicate clearly to parents when and how you are available to provide phone or in-person support. Third, acknowledge the boundaries you need to prevent your own burnout and overwhelm. When it comes to setting healthy boundaries, you can simply ask yourself, what am I okay with and what am I not okay with? Or are there other sources of support or staff available for families to help avoid burnout? For example, you may need boundaries around when and how you will communicate with your students' parents. Perhaps seeing a message pop up on your phone may produce anxiety. It's a healthy boundary then to turn off notifications and to move messaging apps for parents off of your phone. This gives you a sense of agency over your time and energy. You might decide, I'll check parent messages on my computer once in the morning and once in the afternoon, and let them know I'll be in touch within 24 hours. In addition, let your schedule reflect your priorities and boundaries. Schedule in regular time for engagement with all families, but also set aside specific time for reaching out to families who need or want more intensive support. By scheduling this work into your routines, you can plan how you want to engage and respond rather than only reacting to situations as they come up. Finally, remember, as we've discussed throughout this series, empathetic mirroring is a powerful practice, not only with students, but with caregivers. One question people often ask is, how do I know if a family wants empathy without fixing? It's a great question, since sometimes parents really do just want help to troubleshoot problems. Here's a rule of thumb. Use empathy first when a caregiver is distressed or upset, essentially when a parent comes to you and they are not in the green zone. As a reminder, the red zone is when we feel revved up or upset, and the blue zone is when we feel low and slow. The green zone is that just right place where we feel safe and ready for relationships. If a parent is calm or in the green zone, they will typically initiate the problem-solving process. If not, start with empathy before moving to problem-solving. Here's what's powerful about using empathetic mirroring with families. When a family member is distressed, upset, or activated, the practice of empathy often takes us to the story beneath the story, potentially enhancing any problem-solving efforts down the road while also empowering families as they face real struggles. Let's see how this might play out in real life. Ms. Sanchez reads her caregiver messages at the end of an already long day. She receives an angry message from Mrs. Rogers, Lucy's mom. It reads, "I can't believe the homework you assigned yesterday. My child spent hours on it and got so frustrated. This has been our experience for 2 weeks now. You obviously aren't teaching her the lessons correctly. If something doesn't change, I'll be sending an email to the administration immediately." Take a moment to check in with your own reaction. How would you feel if you were Ms. Sanchez? How would you respond? Ms. Sanchez wants to stay regulated instead of reactive, but it's hard. It's hard because Ms. Sanchez is activated and out of the green zone herself. There's a story behind the story for Ms. Sanchez. She is working so hard right now. Nothing is the same in teaching this year. For her, it feels like being a first-year teacher all over again on top of monitoring her own child's remote education. Ms. Sanchez thinks to herself, I enjoy having Lucy in my class, and the thought of her struggling at home for hours makes me feel guilty. But I'm also annoyed this is the first I've heard about this. Ms. Sanchez is using the name it to tame it method to give herself permission to feel. She acknowledges her own feelings and reactions, and then she moves into curiosity. I wonder what's going on with Lucy's family. I wonder what's the story beneath the story that is here. Ms. Sanchez takes a deep breath and composes a reply, trusting that staying out of judgment and mirroring Lucy's mom first will help her to build a connection. She messages back, Ms. Rogers, thank you for your message. It sounds like things have been tough, and I'm hearing that Lucy's been overwhelmed and confused by the material and that you feel frustrated by how a class is going for her. That sounds hard, and you must feel overwhelmed as well. Ms. Rogers writes back, Ms. Sanchez, yes, it has really been too much for her to get through. She doesn't have the extra support she usually has at school, and I'm holding down a lot here. I'm working nights at the hospital right now, and I'm no math teacher. I think we need more support. What do you see going on with Lucy during class? Now take a moment to reflect. How do you think Ms. Rogers might feel reading this email? Take a moment to list the feelings she might experience after being mirrored. Simply push pause and restart the video when you're ready. Notice 3 things. Ms. Rogers' feelings were validated. She has permission to feel. Ms. Sanchez gave herself permission to feel too. And Ms. Rogers was empowered to suggest what she, as the expert on her family and Lucy, thought Lucy might need. She was also empowered to ask more questions and get support that felt right to her. There might not be a smooth and easy solution to Lucy's struggle in this class, but in this case, empathy built a bridge between Ms. Sanchez and Ms. Rogers. As shame and empathy researcher Brene Brown describes, empathy has no script. There's no right way or wrong way to do it. It's simply listening, holding space, withholding judgment, emotionally connecting, and communicating that incredibly healing message of you're not alone. In the end, Ms. Rogers didn't have the power to stop the pandemic or change the community-level stressors impacting Lucy's family. What she could do was provide the space for hard feelings amidst the stress. Ms. Sanchez portrayed an available, empathetic, and responsive teacher and partner in Lucy's education. She also displayed boundaries. And by choosing empathy before fixing, she opened a window for collaboration and more effective problem solving. Before we move on to Chapter 2, let's do a quick self-assessment in 4 areas. First, consistent and responsive communication, or how clear and reliable you are with family communication. Do caregivers hear from you regularly? And are they kept in the loop about how their child is? Do they know they'll hear back from you? Or do they know how to reach you? Second, positive communication. Does your communication include information about students' strengths and successes? And do you use growth-oriented language to discuss areas of need? Third, empathetic communication or expressing understanding of where the family might be coming from. Do you mirror back family experiences and stay out of judgment and blame? And finally, boundaries, or a clear understanding and expression of how you feel most comfortable handling family communication. Are you clear about what works best for you in family communication to keep you from becoming drained or overwhelmed? For each area, identify 1 glow, an area where you excel, and 1 grow, an area where you can improve. Simply push pause and restart the video when you are ready. Welcome back. Let's review. In this chapter, we identified barriers in building partnerships with families. We identified strategies to build healthy, responsive relationships with students' families. In addition to being an available and empathetic partner who provides regular buffering care to students and families, educators also have a role in connecting families with resources to help optimize development at home, especially for families who have experienced trauma and stress. Researchers at the Center for the Developing Child describe the importance of empowering caregivers in key areas. The single most common factor for children and teens who develop the capacity to overcome serious hardship is having at least 1 stable and committed relationship with a supportive parent, caregiver, or other adult. These relationships provide the personalized responsiveness and protection that buffer children from developmental disruption and model the capabilities such as the ability to plan, monitor, adjust, and regulate behavior that enable individuals to respond adaptively to adversity and thrive. This combination of supportive relationships, adaptive skill building, and positive experiences interacts with genetic predispositions to form the foundation of resilience. Decades of research have examined where we as educators can have the largest impact when it comes to this kind of resource building. And researchers have identified key principles for supporting families in this way. But before we explore these principles, let's reflect first on the areas in which families in your community have asked for support. Take all the time you need to reflect. Simply pause and restart the video when you are ready. We've heard families asking for support with pragmatic issues such as connections to health and financial support, after-school solutions, support with homework, and troubleshooting common developmental problems or parenting issues. But it's important to acknowledge that each community has a unique set of needs, and each family has a unique set of values, beliefs, and priorities. As we've discussed in Chapter 1, how you are with caregivers is more important than what you do with caregivers. To help with the how, we've summarized key principles to drive engagement with families. First, all the way from pre-K to college, take a strengths-based approach. Identify as soon as possible the treasures each family holds. Research has shown that sometimes educators fall into viewing parents as the cause of children's problems. A reframe of this harmful assessment is to acknowledge what data demonstrates. Intergenerational trauma and stress can be passed down through generations through complex genetic and epigenetic processes, as well as through ongoing harsh or dangerous community conditions. Even before the pandemic, almost half of US children experienced more than one adverse childhood experience. And 51% of children with 4 or more ACEs experience learning and behavior problems, adding more parenting and education challenges to families already dealing with stress. Layer onto this generational process the ongoing stress of the pandemic, and you can see how the story beneath the story for many families is a story of ongoing stress and hardship. As one teacher noted, I can get blinded to the family story when I'm focused on the student story. Last May, I had one student who stopped coming to school abruptly. I felt frustrated with the student's grandmother, and frankly, I just felt sad for all that my student was missing. It was only when I got her grandmother on the phone that I realized the family was working through multiple family tragedies, and that internet problems were at the very bottom of the list. When I got this information, I was able to stay in empathy and offer support. From this perspective of compassion, curiosity can bloom. The question of what's wrong with this family becomes, what are this family's strengths and needs? Now let's take a moment to pause and breathe. Some of this information is heavy, and acknowledging the hardship some of our students' families continue to face is overwhelming. Remembering that your own regulation practices are some of the most important trauma-sensitive strategies a teacher can use. Start by letting your hands rest loosely in your lap or by your side. Now close your eyes. Become aware of your breathing and notice how your abdomen rises and falls with each breath. Now take a long, slow breath in through your nose all the way down into your stomach. Hold that breath for just a moment and then exhale through your mouth. Allow your breath to carry away all the stress and tension as the air floods out of your lungs. Take another slow breath in through your nose, fill your lungs completely, hold it for a moment, and release the breath through your mouth. Empty your lungs completely. Take a third breath in, hold it for a moment, and then let it go. Now give your attention to your shoulder muscles and the muscles in your neck. As you slowly draw in a nice deep breath, pull your shoulders up toward your ears and squeeze those muscles firmly. Now breathe out completely and allow your contracted muscles to go loose and limp. Again, pull your shoulders up towards your ears and squeeze these muscles firmly. Now feel the tension subside as you relax and breathe out. Again, fill your lungs with air slowly. Now let your mouth relax and let the breath flood all the way out. When you are ready, slowly open your eyes. Great work. Now we'll introduce you to a practice that some educators use to uncover and name the strengths and needs of a family. This strategy is called an eco-map. Let's try it now. Using your own life as an example, on your piece of paper, draw a circle in the middle and write your name inside the circle. Then, draw more circles around the circle, connecting these circles to the middle circle with lines. Now think about the resources you have. What relationships, services, communities, capabilities, personality traits, and strengths help you cope with life? What keeps you regulated and in the green zone? You can make these lines between really important resources and yourself darker and thicker. For instance, if your extended family plays a large role in your life, make the connecting line thicker. Next, consider areas in your life where you lack resources or where there are barriers to accessing resources. Fill in circles with these areas of need and use a dashed line to connect the circles to your center circle. Now, take some time to finish completing your ego map while also reflecting on the following questions. What does this activity bring up for me and my view of my life? What are the areas where I need more support or resources? This activity can be completed with families in order to identify where families both have and need more support. But even if your teaching context doesn't allow for the time and space to actually complete eco maps with families, try to see each student and their family through the lens of an eco map. In other words, think in terms of strengths, resources, and needs rather than deficits or shortcomings. In addition, connect families to your district's list of family resources or keep a running list of family resources that fit into your teaching context. This will help families access academic, physical, and psychological resources to shore up some of the gaps in their eco map. One important reminder, families may need to address basic physiological needs before they begin to address some of the skills we will discuss next. In addition, caregivers who are dealing with complex stress may need to be connected with coaching in order to develop these routines. Keep in mind the wraparound or coaching resources in your community as you listen. Next, in order to promote core capabilities that build resilience, provide practical resources to support 3 key areas: building responsive relationships, self-regulation, and routines. Responsive relationships are simply relationships in which a caregiver is able to notice cues and underlying internal experiences from a child and provide an appropriate response to meet the need. This is also called serve and return. Serve and return relationships are like a smoothly flowing tennis match where the child hits the ball toward the caregiver and the caregiver is able to send it right back. As the center for the developing child has identified, responsive relationships early in life are the most important factor in building sturdy brain architecture. And responsive relationships, of course, are key to developing self-regulation. You can support these 2 capabilities by providing resources including videos, visuals, and short articles about serve and return regulation. You can also host family chats, Q&As, and informal times to talk about these key capabilities. Finally, whatever strategies you use in your classroom to effectively support responsive relationships and self-regulation may be helpful at home as well. If something is working, let caregivers know. For example, if you use the language of green, red, and blue zones, provide caregivers with simple, clear information and ready-to-use visuals that match how you use this language in class. Here's an example of an educator video explaining the how and why of using the language of regulation in both the classroom and home.
Hi families, Mrs. Munger here. I just wanted to send a quick video over to explain a practice we've been using in the classroom. It's been really helpful, and so I thought maybe some of you would want to know about it. What we've been doing is simply using this visual to check in each day about how we're doing. As you can see, this visual is really simple. You can make it and use it at home. You can post it on the fridge or on the back door or in your child's bedroom. And what we've been doing is simply saying, hey, how's everyone doing today? And each student can tell me if they're in the blue zone, the green zone, or the red zone. The blue zone is when we're feeling a little low or slow. Maybe we're feeling tired, maybe we're feeling a little sad, like we just don't have quite enough energy. The red zone is when we're feeling like we have a little too much energy, almost like it's spilling over. Maybe we're feeling a little angry, upset, or irritable, or maybe even having an outburst. The green zone is when we're feeling calm, grounded, regulated, safe, and social. And actually, the green zone is when we're ready to connect and grow and learn. So as a teacher, the green zone is really important. And I want to know if students are feeling red or blue so that I can help them back to the green zone. In addition, I use this for self-awareness as a teacher. It's really important for me to know if I'm starting the day, if I'm not in the green zone. If I find myself in the blue zone, I might take time to take 10 really deep breaths so that I can get ready to connect and teach. If you have any questions about how to use this at home, how to make the visual, or any of the language that I've used, please send me a message. I would love to hear from you, and I hope you have a great day.
Here's another example. If you use a quiet corner for calming, then send home a one-pager or a short video about the power of having safe spaces to calm down. As we've said, it's not your job to be a doctor or a therapist. Your area of expertise as an educator is providing that daily dose of connection and calming. Most caregivers would like for their home to run as smoothly as your classroom does, and most caregivers will welcome simple strategies for building connected and calming relationships. A third way to support the development is to help families form emotionally satisfying caregiver-child routines. What do we mean by this? An emotionally satisfying routine is a caregiving routine in which both caregiver and child enjoy and connect with one another. Key routines include, from pre-K all the way to high school, waking up and getting ready, meals, homework time, and bedtime. For younger children, important routines also include dressing and bathing. As an educator, you can offer resources around each important routine, giving caregivers ideas for engaging with these routines daily, and this is important, infusing these routines with play or enjoyment. Caregivers often feel incredible amounts of stress, shame, and guilt around their parenting and often don't feel good enough for the job. Because many caregivers are not aware of how important joyful routines or the regular, predictable, and daily infusion of "I love you and enjoy you" are for the building of the brain, they may not be engaging in routines in a predictable or a satisfying way. Caregivers who are dealing with multiple stressors or significant trauma may need to be connected with coaching in order to develop these routines. But breaking down and encouraging joyful routines is a simple and powerful strategy for educators to begin building language and skills around responsivity and regulation. Obviously, there's a wide range of differences across ages for encouraging routines. But here are some simple and practical examples of supporting families as they develop routines. For elementary age students, provide a resource that breaks down a bedtime routine that includes a checkout for the day and a fun bedtime song. Or encourage caregivers to incorporate simple games into the breakfast or dinner each day. For middle school students, create a reminder for caregivers to provide a nightly bedtime visit to the child to check out and close the day together. Or create a template for caregivers to use to pass kind and supporting notes back and forth with their child each morning as they leave for school. Finally, for high school students, communicate with families directly about the importance of a nightly routine in which a caregiver expresses support and asks, "Is there anything I can do to help you right now?" Or provide videos to model how a caregiver might playfully and intentionally engage in schoolwork or a homework routine, especially for students who are learning at home. Now take a moment to reflect on how you might encourage responsive relationships, self-regulation, and routines in families in your teaching context. Take all the time you need, simply pause and restart the video when you are ready. Great job. We hope this sparked new ideas for building positive and supportive connections with families. Finally, it's important as an educator to acknowledge the scope of your job and those moments when you feel the concerns of a family are too heavy to carry alone. Just like with students, you're going to encounter situations where you need to connect caregivers to more support, especially when families have unmet physiological or safety needs. One way of keeping an eye on this is to use the 0 to 100 scale we introduced in the second video in our series, understanding your experiences and building resilience. You can teach caregivers this scale by sending them a simple video and let them know you'll be checking in with them regularly. When you check in, simply ask, using messaging or automated surveys, "How are you doing on that 0 to 100 scale? And is there anything I can send home to support, or would it be all right if I connected you to our support services?" Here's an example of a video you can send to families.
Hi families, it's Miss Guillory here. I just wanted to send you this message and let you know that I'm going to be using this check-in process this school year. And so once a month, you will be getting a message from me, and I'm only going to be asking you 2 questions to help make sure that I am supporting your family during this time. And so the 2 check-in questions are, first, how are you doing on a scale from 0 to 100? And so when you think of this scale here, think of grades, right? So if you're at a 100, you're feeling fantastic, feeling really good, in a really good place. And if you're at a 0, then you're really, really struggling, feeling very overwhelmed and very stressed. If you're somewhere in the middle, then you may be feeling somewhat overwhelmed, and that can be an indication of needing a little bit of support. So I know for me personally, during this pandemic, there have been times when I've been at around a 62. And for me, I knew that was time that I was starting to feel overwhelmed and I needed to reach out for some support. The second question I'm going to be asking you each month is just checking in to see if there's anything that I can send home to support you, or if it's okay to connect you to our support services. And so those are the 2 questions. I'm going to be checking in with you monthly because I want to make sure that I'm doing all I can to support you and your family during this time. If you have any questions for me, I'm here for you. Just let me know.
Not only will many caregivers feel supported and seen by this practice, it will also help you to know when to reach out for more intensive support. This practice can also create opportunities for educators to connect families to mental health resources and providers, which may serve as a buffer to families during highly stressful seasons. You can find a list of mental health resources for caregivers on the resources section of the Project Restore website. Connecting families to more supports will also help you from burnout and help you to keep providing those daily doses of connection and care. And just as important, it'll keep families from falling through the cracks in the extended web of support. As you employ some of these strategies to strengthen educator-family partnerships, here are a few indicators that these relationships are going well. First, there's regular 2-way communication between you and the student families. Second, over time, families begin to reach out to you to collaborate or seek resources. In other words, families see you as available and resourceful. Third, you are aware of the strengths and needs of each family. Let's review. In this chapter, we identified key principles for partnering with families to build resources and core capabilities. And we identified strategies for building resources with families. We hope today's exploration helped you connect to the stories of student families and to continue to cultivate empathy and curiosity as you build school-to-home partnerships. As a reminder, you can find additional resources you might find helpful as you and your campus support families and students during these trying times. To close out, let's review key concepts from this video. We defined the educator's role as a partner to families and identified strategies such as using empathy and a strengths-based approach to build healthy, responsive relationships with your students' families. We defined the educator's role as a resource builder for families and identify strategies for supporting families to build the core capacities of responsive relationships, self-regulation, and routines. And finally, we explored using the 0 to 100 stress scale to monitor families who may need to get connected to more resources. For our final action step, we're going to try one final exercise. Send a text to yourself this time. Reflect on one key takeaway from this video and how it might change your view of families this year. You can pull up this text throughout the year whenever you face challenges with families. Finally, before you leave us, go ahead and complete this check for understanding to solidify your learning today. Thanks for joining us on this learning journey. And don't forget, additional resources you might find helpful as you and your campus support families and students during these trying times can be found on the Project Restore website.